Fake siblings. I was an only child of my married parents in my family household. 2023. When my father Kevin was 20 in 1950, approximately, he bought a house at 27, Campbell Street, Yarragon. It was his small dream to own a house there, having liked the idea of the location from a young child and consciously worked towards it from a young age. He was General Sir John Monash's grandnephew, so when he was young he correctly felt he was being groomed for a potential job in the military, which got scary during World War II. World War II ended when he was 15. After he had taken ownership of the property and settled in, he was single and paying off a very large loan with dedication. He was picked up by an older woman, one of my grandmother Donna Podolsky's lookalikes. She lied and said she was on contraception, had one-night sex with him, and left. She had twins with white blonde hair and bluish eyes 9 months later. At some point she had been lied to and told that because he was the son of an indigenous albino woman, there would be an increased likelihood of white or blonde-haired, blue-eyed babies. The appearance of the first set of twins made whoever she associated with assume he was a potential white or blonde-haired, blue-eyed baby factory, as if a magic spell coming true. A year later, my father Kevin was picked up by the other of Donna Podolsky's lookalikes, pretending to be the one from a year earlier. She lied and said she was on contraception, had one-night sex with him, and left. She had twins with white blondish hair and bluish-grey eyes 9 months later. When the previous female was 6 months pregnant, Donna Podolsky, former Fatal Attraction, wife of my grandfather Ioseb Jugashvili, Stalin, moved in on my father Kevin, pretending to be the other 2 females for a third night of sex in 18 months. After sex and some dating, she took advantage of his calm okay, I've never had a relationship before attitude and moved in with my father Kevin for 3 months at 27, Campbell Street, Yarragon. She was waiting for the previous female to have the children she was pregnant with without consent. Donna was Fatal Attraction clingy and repeatedly talking of engagement and marriage, whilst really on contraception in an attempt to build fake trust. When the previous female had her twins and they had whitish blonde hair and blue or grey eyes, Donna stopped taking contraception, took fertility pills, and jumped my father for sex repeatedly. When she was sure she was pregnant, she packed and left without telling him why. Try not to think of the song, Oh Donna. Of course, my father Kevin was a legitimate Habsburg. His royal family had been dissolved as the constitutional monarchy of Austria and Hungary around 8 years before he was born. Stalking him for being a Habsburg, no reason, really, was also one of the motives for a large number of people. 9 months after she got pregnant, Donna Podolsky had quadruplets to my father Kevin's semen without his consent or full knowledge, and some of them had whitish blondish hair and bluish or grey eyes. All 8 children total, to all 3 females, including Donna Podolsky, were born illegitimate without consent from my father Kevin. All of them and all their descendants, regardless of circumstances, are or were completely irrelevant to all my royal families, official or technical. All biological siblings to me, half paternal, half maternal, or full biological siblings with the same 2 biological parents, and all their descendants are completely irrelevant to all my royal families, official or technical. I have no eligible descendants for any of my royal families. I have no eligible siblings, relatives, for any of my royal families. Being conceived illegitimately using my father Kevin Webb's sperm in my grandmother Donna Podolsky does not make a child part Romanov, Jugashvili. I am part Romanov through my grandfather Ioseb, Stalin. Donna Podolsky, who saw all babies she had after her divorce of my grandfather Ioseb, Stalin, as baggage she didn't need, then moved to Argentina at some point to train little terrorists and organized crime minions. She began stalking her biological son Jim Morrison, the Doors, at some point afterwards, for a target, after he gained renown through his music. His captured career is very illustrative of situations mentioned in this text. Judith Marslen, née Jugashvili before adoption in Australia, legitimate daughter of Ioseb, Stalin, and Donna Podolsky, was introduced to my father Kevin years after her mother had lived with him for 3 months earlier in the decade. He did not know she was Donna's daughter. It was 1957 and she was just 17, if you know what I mean. By then, though a possible relationship could mean endless blue-eyed and white or blonde-haired babies to steal. My father Kevin Webb wasn't all that keen on getting all that involved with her as she was only 17. But did begin to date her more and more often during her 17th year. When she turned 18, he asked her to marry him, and she said yes. My father Kevin G. Webb, the legitimate Habsburg, married Judith Margaret Marslen, née Jugashvili before adoption, the ineligible biological Hohenzollern and ineligible biological Romanov. They were married in Moe, Gippsland, Australia on the 3rd of May, 1958. They were both part indigenous Gippslander, my father directly through his mother, and my mother through her grandfather Bessaronis. They had never lived together before. The wedding day was their first night living together. My father Kevin carried Judith, spawn of Donna Podolsky, over the threshold into my family home at 27, Campbell Street, Yarragon, to start their marriage. The wedding night was the first night they had ever lived together, or slept together. Judith became pregnant in around June 1958 to her new husband, within 2 months of the wedding. Her father Ioseb, Stalin, had her under casual surveillance, using his intelligence service contacts. She swapped places with a lookalike who was only vaguely and obscurely related, but looked almost identical. The lookalike was pregnant with the grandchild of Ricky O'Shea, a former maximum security life without parole prisoner in Dachau prison in Germany. O'Shea had escaped when the newly named neo-Nazi terrorism group took the prison at gunpoint by executing all the guards and staff, and released all the inmates to join them in December 1943. That newly named terrorism group had already executed all but around 10 to 12 members of German parliament earlier that month. They had also abducted the Kaiser and Chancellor Adolf Hitler the Hohenzollern and made him a prisoner of war underground in Yugoslavia. After the prison was taken and emptied of its inmates, O'Shea was given the job of running it for the neo-Nazis as the new fake governor. Some of the inmates thought it was like the ultimate Christmas present to be busted out in a violent uprising and join a terrorism group that had mass murdered nearly all members of parliament. The neo-Nazi terrorism group then decided to fill the prison with homosexual males they were illegally segregating from the general public. O'Shea was given the job of coordinating the torture of the detained homosexuals. He was told to try to torture the inmates into pretending to be sexually attracted to females or sexual contact with them in exchange for the promise of basic items like food, blankets, water, beds, showers, and access to a toilet. The jail became very overcrowded. Hermann Göring, a homosexual, was lured to a coffee shop-like establishment in Germany, then drugged to unconscious. Photos were taken of him laying on his back after falling off his chair backwards, unconscious. Göring was then disfigured in the face with implements used to burn decorative designs into timber to try to make his face look like a map of Scotland. He was shipped to Dachau and put in the O'Shea-run prison. Göring's identity documents were stolen off him. For the sake of anybody who has had to put up with Morin's follow-up crimes to those committed by neo-Nazis during WW2, being illegally busted out of a maximum security prison by that terrorism group in December 1943 was not a pardon for criminal convictions. The neo-Nazis decided to make O'Shea over to look like Göring and give him Hermann's identity documents. They called in their former award-winning film production crew, including costume designers and makeup artists, and told them to make O'Shea look like Hermann. As a casual side note, the award-winning former film production crew had worked for Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer before World War II, no offense to them. I am not sure what awards they won. Golden Globes, Emmys. Sometime in 1944 my great-grandfather Prince Sebastian Habsburg, Kaiser and Chancellor Adolf Hitler the Hohenzollern's official royal consort, was sent to the prison at Dachau and became one of O'Shea's new victims. It was after Sebastian had been found trying to get into the building he had been living in with Kaiser Adolf the previous year. In November 1943 he had left Adolf in Berlin to attempt a trip to Scotland. He had returned to a confusingly completely deserted Berlin in late January 1944. Sebastian had been illegally detained with no food in the building's public reception foyer until his physical and mental condition had seriously deteriorated, before being sent to Dachau. Both Sebastian and Hermann were illegally detained in Dachau until it was taken from the neo-Nazis by force by the Allies in mid-1945. O'Shea was pretending to be Hermann Göring when arrested. O'Shea was later charged and put on trial at Nuremberg for escaping jail, crimes committed against homosexuals illegally detained in Dachau prison during neo-Nazi terrorist uprising WW2, and for illegally using the identity of Hermann Göring whilst doing it. Göring is Webb in German. Göring had been in Dachau when it was run by former inmate Ricky O'Shea, who was pretending to be Hermann when torturing the inmates, including Hermann. When O'Shea was tried at Nuremberg, the court announcer read out the charges whilst film cameras were pointed at O'Shea in the dock. The film crew did not have enough lettering space to put the entire charge of impersonating Göring on the screen, so when the charge was read out, the graphic on the film footage just said the words Hermann Göring. When television took off, with mainly compulsive liars trying to cover up crimes like Kaiser Adolf Hitler the Hohenzollern being in prisoner of war jail in Yugoslavia, not dead, at the helm, they started pretending it was really Hermann on trial for television. Still do in some cases. They took a sound bite of the audio from the charge of illegally using the identity of Hermann Göring being read out when Göring's name was mentioned by the court announcer. They then edited that audio over the audio of the court announcer reading the words, Ricky O'Shea, you are charged with for television. So it sounded robotically like O'Shea's name was replaced with the words, Hermann Göring, during the hearings. The early years of television were nearly all unofficial, or pirate, broadcasts. Anyone could erect a transmitter, pick a frequency within the frequency range, broadcast anything they wanted. For anyone to twirl the knob and tune into like a radio with pictures. There were the manufacturers of the television's official broadcasts, some state-sponsored broadcasts, but it was mostly all do-it-yourselfers broadcasting anything they wanted. Including homemade fake history to cover up world-leading legends being held illegally in an underground jail when TVs started to sell, amongst other crimes. Most of it was pornography. Including, ironically enough, homosexual men having sex in abundance. It was a worst-case scenario starter to the medium. People who are aware television wasn't properly regulated, or still isn't, in their area for decades hate Australia. This country was one of the first countries to fully regulate television and ban pirate or unlicensed broadcasting. That is why they get so desperate to intertwine illegal broadcasts in the digital TV signals and sell ways to decode it. So they can do what they still do in some other countries. Australia had a famous start date and time for official television here, where the announcer said, "Welcome to television." What it meant was welcome to regulated television with a "you won't see that on here" tone. It didn't last, but at least they had a go. Satellites made it worse starting the late 1970s. The lazy spy eye in different spectrums caused much less caution and preparation to happen. Back to 1958. During the second half of that year, the lookalike female to my father's wife Judith started pretending to be my father's wife full-time, and he was too busy to notice the difference fully. She was already pregnant when she started. He was working 6 days a week minimum to pay off the house. He never once stopped and definitively said, "You're not my wife, who are you?" regardless of his observations. He did think he may have married someone with a mild mental illness, which was true. The impostor wife never had sex with my father Kevin in 20 years pretending to be his wife from there. She always insisted on separate beds as the usual routine. The impostor wife was implanted into my father Kevin's household, pregnant with Ricky O'Shea's grandchild, specifically because Ricky O'Shea had tortured my father Kevin's grandfather Prince Sebastian Habsburg, former consort of my mother's biological grandfather Kaiser Adolf Hitler, in Dachau prison 1944-5. It was an attempt to steal ancestral family Habsburg memories off my father Kevin, hoping he would mistake the child, Judith, for his own, and pass them on to a grandchild of the man tried at Nuremberg for torturing his grandfather Prince Sebastian Habsburg. Plus follow-up stalking of a descendant of a victim of the neo-Nazis during the last 18 months of World War II. The extra semi-unknown element was Hermann Going being a relative of my father Kevin, and Hermann also being tortured by Ricky O'Shea in Dachau in 1944-5. The daughter of my father's impostor wife and Mr. Pedersen, son of Ricky O'Shea the neo-Nazi tried at Nuremberg, was born in March 1959 and illegally registered to my father Kevin at birth without his consent. A futile attempt to steal ancestral family memories of the Habsburgs off my father Kevin, because they can never be stolen. When my father tried to communicate with her in Habsburg DNA, she couldn't perceive it as she was not part Habsburg, so there was no chance of him passing on ancestral family memory history. My grandfather Ioseb, Stalin, was informed a baby had been registered to my father Kevin and Ioseb's daughter at birth. Ioseb came to the conclusion that the new child, Judith, wasn't his daughter's child, or my father Kevin's based on his opinion and surveillance. Her mother, the impostor wife of my father, was not part Hohenzollern or Romanov. My father's real wife, my mother, was. The new child was named after my father's real wife and not a descendant of Ioseb or Adolf. Kaiser Adolf Hitler the Hohenzollern escaped prisoner of war jail in Yugoslavia in approximately November 1959, when prison governor, Joe, the North American with a twangy Yosemite Sam-like accent, shot himself whilst forcing Adolf to play Russian gun roulette at gunpoint. The full set of prison keys was on his uniform when he shot himself. Kaiser Adolf was able to get the keys off his uniform through the bars and they unlocked everything. Kaiser Adolf made it out of and away from the prison and decided to try to walk to Italy. In 1960 Kaiser Adolf was charged with the only ever criminal offense he was charged with in his lifetime by Italian police. They charged him under his real name and birth date, fully officially recorded, did interviews, and dropped the charge of low-grade assault. An Italian convent resident had tried to pour raw iodine on one of Kaiser Adolf's worst wounds when he was trying to explain how iodine could be used as a disinfectant and anesthetic, if diluted and mixed with other substances. Kaiser Adolf had tried to punch the vial out of the Morin's hand to stop raw iodine getting in his open wound, and accidentally got him a glancing blow in the face on the follow-through. They tried to charge him with assault for it, as if he had done something wrong. Later, in 1960 Italian authorities interrogating Kaiser Adolf found that his former official consort, when he was abducted in 1943, Prince Sebastian Habsburg, was still alive, and terminally ill in palliative care, and could die any day. They decided to reunite them to see how Adolf reacted, as if thinking it would be funny in some way, or might break him. Kaiser Adolf and Prince Sebastian were reunited in the palliative care hospital for the first time since November 1943, and Prince Sebastian died 6 days later. Prince Sebastian was my father's grandfather. My father Kevin's impostor wife got pregnant with dead prison governor Joe's granddaughter in around January 1961. The people who organized the second pregnancy in the impostor wife were having a bit of fun. There was no real connected motive for the pregnancy. Joe's son was away at a military or school-themed camp when Kaiser Adolf escaped and was the only family member to survive his father Joe's killing spree that day. Sadie Einstein, who was still living on the other side of the bars to Kaiser Adolf, was away with her daughter the day Kaiser Adolf escaped. Joe's son had been a trainee guard during the previous 3 years, with plans to have him take over from his father as governor. He had guarded Kaiser Adolf in prisoner of war jail before Adolf's escape in 1959. Joe's son was where the sperm for the pregnancy in 1961 came from, and was around 19 when Adolf escaped in 1959. On the 12th of August, 1961 Kaiser Adolf Hitler the Hohenzollern took diplomatic asylum in Italy, adopting the name Wolfgang Alphonse and becoming an Italian citizen. Both German nations were immediately informed of the agreement being signed. The East German government arrived in Berlin and began construction of the Berlin Wall the following day on the 13th of August. They discussed it, as if they said to each other, what were people doing to him before he was abducted? Oh, that's right. People were reminding him of being nearly fatally wounded with a machine gun during WW1 regularly. To see if he had a nervous breakdown back to a silent, distressed, unresponsive stare. Like the state he was in when he spent around 5 years in hospital between 1917 and 1922, trying to recover from his horrific wounds and surgeries. The insipid beginnings of the Berlin Wall were wooden X-shaped obstacles propped up along the starting point for construction, with WW1-like barbed wire connecting them. To remind him of the place he was machine gunned at. As close to where Kaiser Adolf was wounded on the Western Front as they could remember. When the path of the new wall was finalized, they immediately got more serious. It started looking like a more coherent, neat, almost palace-like wall, as if he was watching the construction and may approve, or be more enthusiastic or something. That soon disappeared like it was just there for a psychological tease, as construction sped up suddenly and gained momentum. When it did, it started looking like a copy of Western Front trench photos being erected in the streets. People were likely referencing trench photographs on site during that phase, getting first-hand looks to compare the construction to sections of trench during WW1. The path through some sections of Berlin ended up looking like the path of the train line. Kaiser Adolf was held prisoner in Yugoslavia under between December 1943 and 1959, cutting through Berlin. With the no-man's land area between the walls as wide as the train lines he was under for nearly 16 years. They then rendered the outside of the wall's neatest-looking parts to make the outside of the walls on both sides look like the concrete shoes he had on his feet when he escaped, that he trekked all the way to Italy and had been on his feet for over 15 years. They felt they were straight back into it like robots after he had been missing or detained for over 17 years. Some of those involved pretended Adolf had signed on to be treated like he was in a free-range equivalent of Ricky O'Shea neo-Nazi-run Dachau prison and would only return to Germany with any other possible flow-on scenarios if he sexually penetrated a woman, and bragged about it. They started having Italian prostitutes follow him around immediately. He even got aggressively accosted by a female prostitute through the window of a barber shop the first time he got a haircut after taking asylum. She banged on the window with her hands and hips genitals to get his attention, making a finger-rubbing pay-me motion with her fingers and mouthing the words "back to Germany." People had Italian prostitutes follow him around constantly afterwards, implying if he paid one for sex he would end up being publicly outed as alive and well, and let resume being monarch in Germany. They kept picturing him trying to have sex with one and brag about it, then being found with his bags packed sitting outside his house, waiting for a German diplomat to arrive in a car and pick him up to take him back to Germany. Even a limousine. They thought if they found him sitting at his door with his bags packed waiting, disgusting with himself for trying to have sex with a woman, it would be the funniest thing ever. Some people think that one of the motives for them building the Berlin Wall was to imply that it would only come down, with Germany reunified, if an inbred half-Hohenzollern-Einstein child was produced somehow to fill the fake void left behind by Sadie Einstein's miscarried fetus in 1944. As if Adolf would try to find a way to supply one. Others thought it was just a do as we say, no matter how inappropriate, disgusting or offensive, and it might get taken down and tease. The impostor wife's second child was born in October 1961 and registered to my father Kevin illegally at birth. Daughter of Joe the dead prisoner of war jail governor's son. She was born less than 2 years after Adolf's escape, which included her grandfather's death. My grandfather Ioseb Stalin was informed a baby had been registered to my father Kevin and Ioseb's daughter at birth. Ioseb came to the conclusion that the new second registered child wasn't his daughter's child, or my father Kevin's based on his opinion and surveillance. Her mother, the impostor wife of my father, was not part Hohenzollern or Romanov. My father's real wife, my mother, was. The new child was not a descendant of Ioseb or Adolf. In 1963 my father Kevin's impostor wife got pregnant with the granddaughter of a fourth in command of one of the execution areas at Auschwitz in Poland that had been frequented by Einstein during World War II. A Mr. van der Mullen, approximate, who was Einstein's personal guard when he went to watch mass murders in Auschwitz. It was a vague futile plan to attempt to keep trying to steal Habsburg ancestral memories off my father using a child descended from someone who had victimized his grandfather Prince Sebastian in some way. They tried a descendant of Mr. van der Mullen because Prince Sebastian's identity documents had been left on the body of a deceased Jewish man murdered in Auschwitz when Sebastian was put in Dachau. They thought it would be enough of a post-World War II hysterical fear connection, or something. Einstein's attempt to steal the Habsburg royal family during WW1 had also resulted in the Habsburg dynasty constitutional monarchy being dissolved during the 1920s, leaving only our Webb family private Habsburg estate and residual titles. The third child was born in October 1963 and registered to my father Kevin illegally at birth without his consent. Daughter of the impostor wife and a descendant of a fourth in command of Auschwitz. My grandfather Ioseb Stalin was informed a baby had been registered to my father Kevin and Ioseb's daughter at birth. Ioseb came to the conclusion that the new child wasn't his daughter's child, or my father Kevin's based on his opinion and surveillance. Her mother, the impostor wife of my father, was not part Hohenzollern or Romanov. My father's real wife, my mother, was. The new child was not a descendant of Ioseb or Adolf. In 1966 my father's impostor wife got pregnant again with the granddaughter of a part Egyptian and part English man. He had been in a maximum security prison serving life without parole in November 1943. Similar to O'Shea, he had been busted out when the neo-Nazis took that prison as well in December 1943, then given the job of running the prison when it was filled with homosexual females illegally segregated from the public by the neo-Nazis. That man was Mr. Richardson. Richardson was given the job of coordinating the torture of the detained homosexuals as the new fake governor. He was told to torture the inmates into pretending to be sexually attracted to males or sexual contact with them in exchange for the promise of basic items like food, blankets, water, beds, showers, and access to a toilet. The jail became very overcrowded. The neo-Nazis decided to make Richardson over to look like Rudolf Hesse and give him Hesse's identity documents. They again called in their former award-winning film production crew, including costume designers and makeup artists, and told them to make Richardson look like Hesse. Hesse lived out the rest of his days very quietly in Gippsland, Australia after World War II, almost unnoticed. Richardson was arrested when the prison was captured by the Allies in mid-1945. Similar to O'Shea, Richardson was tried at Nuremberg for his escape, pretending to be Rudolf Hesse, and torturing homosexual females in the prison he was a former inmate of for the neo-Nazis between January 1944 and the end of World War II in mid-1945. The prison had over 20% part Australians illegally detained in it, along with large number of Canadian and Iraqi women. When Richardson was tried at Nuremberg, the court announcer read out the charges whilst film cameras were pointed at Richardson in the dock. The film crew did not have enough lettering space to put the entire charge of impersonating Hesse on the screen, so when the charge was read out, the graphic on the film footage just said the words Rudolf Hesse. When television took off, with some compulsive liars trying to cover up crimes like Kaiser Adolf Hitler the Hohenzollern being in prisoner of war jail in Yugoslavia, not dead, at the helm, they started pretending it was really Hesse on trial for television. Still do in some cases. Soundbite of the audio from the charge of illegally using the identity of Rudolf Hesse being read out when Hesse's name was mentioned by the court announcer. They then edited that audio over the audio of the court announcer reading the words, "Mr. Richardson, you are charged with a for television." So it sounded robotically like Richardson's name was replaced with the words Rudolf Hesse during the hearings. The what turned out to be final child of the impostor wife was born in March 1967 and illegally registered to my father Kevin without consent. Their motive was that because there were so many part Australian females in that jail in 1945, perhaps my father was related to a few of them and that would facilitate ancestral memory theft for them. My grandfather Ioseb, Stalin, was informed a baby had been registered to my father Kevin and Ioseb's daughter at birth. Ioseb came to the conclusion that the new child wasn't his daughter's child or my father Kevin's based on his opinion and surveillance. Her mother, the impostor wife of my father, was not part Hohenzollern or Romanov. My father's real wife, my mother, was. The new child was not a descendant of Ioseb or Adolf. They have always known that the four older females that were illegally registered to my father Kevin at birth were not my older sisters, as they were not part Romanov Jugashvili or Hohenzollern, and I am born to four different men than my father Kevin, none part Habsburg either. People trying to make me pretend they were real biological and legal sisters to me when I was growing up have always been adamant that I have to pretend I am not part Hohenzollern, Romanov, or Habsburg, despite my DNA and the not-so-secret DNA tests without my consent. They have been a lost cause for decades. In about April 1971, my mother Judith, on the other hand, had gotten pregnant, for what turned out to be the 14th time, once a year since she married my father Kevin, to her husband Kevin, my father, with triplets, including me, whilst he was on holiday in East Gippsland's Lakes entrance. She had stolen all previous children he conceived before birth and dumped them unregistered. She was only ever around to have what seemed like once or twice a year sex, enough to get pregnant, the whole marriage, whilst her impostor pretended to be my father Kevin's wife full-time since mid-1958, when Kaiser Adolf was still in prisoner of war jail. When my father wasn't home, my natural inquisitive childhood life was like being in some type of organized crime terrorist crime history encyclopedia storage area, or something. Whilst the fake older sisters talked to their crime family daddies and both their parents' crime family relatives. Information was metaphorically left, laying around. When my father Kevin died in 2004, they stole the family home he left me and his estate off me. They ended up illegally selling it to the boyfriend of the oldest fake sister, Ricky O'Shea's granddaughter. She had been akin to squatting in my family home before he died, living there with her boyfriend and her children, including children that were not really her husband's children from her only marriage. Her boyfriend was probably more than one man swapping places pretending to be the same person. She though he was her sexual partner. He saw her as more like a chore or unpleasant job. Her boyfriend bought my house illegally. He was conceived with Albert Einstein's sperm and had the same mother as Saddam Hussein. I'm part Iraqi, and my great-great-great-grandmother was very briefly queen of Iraq before having my great-great-grandfather with Kaiser Wilhelm I before he became my Hohenzollern family monarch. They then said that they had finally stolen a property that belonged to a Habsburg, me, and illegally signed it over to an Einstein. Finally, because Albert Einstein tried to steal my Habsburg ancestors' royal family during World War I, and thought he had permanently replaced my ancestors with his younger brother pretending to be Charles in 1916. His younger brother was eventually found out as an impostor during WW1, and my ancestors' Habsburg dynasty was dissolved as the constitutional monarchy of Austria and Hungary in around 1922, leaving only residual titles I am eligible for. The constitutional monarchy being dissolved was the direct result of the impostor Charles and Einstein being exposed. It didn't take long to realize Einstein tried the same thing with multiple royal families, then a deliberately inbred child conceived in his sister when Kaiser Adolf was in prisoner of war jail in 1944, because impostors hadn't worked during World War I with other royal families. My private Jugashvili, Stalin, estate and the Romanov estate cannot be stolen by a relative or descendant of the fake Stalin displayed lying in state in 1953, regardless of its nationality. My Hohenzollern Royal family estate and my private Italian estate under my great-grandfather's diplomatic asylum name 1961 to 1978 cannot be stolen by an illegitimate or illegally bred child using my father Kevin's sperm, including gestated in a third party via an illegally created embryo, like a Williams. The USA does not have the right to attempt to violently steal a royal family estate of the rightful owner if that owner, of one of the owner's ancestors, naturally lost virginity with same-gender sex instead of male, female penis, vagina sex. Male to female, penis to vagina sex, as the loss of virginity method, is not compulsory for anyone, including royalty. The four fake older sisters being in my family household when I was born had nothing to do with the possibility I could become crown prince when I happened.